Welcome, Brandon.
Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you here. I don't think that I've ever had a mental performance expert coach on my podcast before. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this topic, and how you came to do this work is through your own personal experience. So why don't we rewind a little bit to begin and have the audience learn about your time as an athlete and how you got into what you're doing now?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think mental performance coaches, it's like a title, and there could be so much under that umbrella. Really, at my core, I'm a healer. And that kind of brings me back to how I got into all this in the first place, because I was your typical meathead football player in college, and I just wanted to have success. My top priorities in life were football, girls, how much I could lift weights, probably in that order, and then maybe college, academics somewhere down below that. And so my first year of playing in college, I just rode the bench, and that's not fun because you go to practice, you do all the hard work, you don't get to play in the game. So in the off season, I was searching for solutions. I already had the workout stuff, the nutrition, all that stuff dialed. So I went into a supplement shop looking for some kind of magic pill, literally, that was going to help get me on the field. And the manager of the shop happened to be a real life mystic, a guy who knew how to do magic. And magic in the sense of, like, he knew how to do energy work to do things I didn't think were supposed to be possible, right? And one of the first things, which may sound really simple to someone now, but at the time, there was no talk about mental health, anxiety, depression. It wasn't really a conversation. And so he showed me a breathing techniques where he said, look through the peripheries of your eyes and just breathe in deep through your nose. And just by doing that, it was the first time. It was like I was in a busy intersection, and then all the traffic just stopped. And I was able to get into the present moment. To me, that was magic. I was like, whoa, you can really shift the way you feel. And I didn't even know that I had anxiety until that moment occurred, and I found a way to find my way out. And so, long story short, I got obsessed with this world. I went down the rabbit hole of learning about all the Eastern philosophy around healing, working with chakras, meridians, energy training, different ways to shift my brainwave state through meditation. And this actually helped me become stronger in the football field, but also taught me how to use the yin part of that, which is to heal people. So I went back, had a really successful season playing football the next year, was a starter, had standout performances. But more interestingly to me, I learned how to start healing my teammates. And I actually would have like a lineup of people who wanted to work with me before the games, before practice. And think about these guys, meatheads, they chewing tobacco on their lip. All right, man, my ankle hurts. Do something with this. But it felt so good to be able to help people in that way. And that really put me down this path of being a healer, and then kind of ebbing and flowing back through sports and through high performance, because that was originally one of my passions.
Mm-hmm. There are a few questions that I have pertaining to that. What do you attribute your performance to after you did some of that energetic work and all of that, when you returned back and you were not on the bench? Was there one particular thing? Like, do you attribute it to that energy or your focus or the meditation? What do you think it was, or was it just a culmination of all of the things?
Yeah, it was definitely a culmination. But if I were to point to one thing, I would say it's understanding how energy works and understanding that we are the vessels for the source to flow through. And so we have all these energy centers, and we have these energy highways in our bodies. So the chakras, the meridians. And I learned how to generate energy, pull in more energy to make myself more powerful. So like one of the techniques he taught me, he had this big refrigerator that you put like protein drinks in and stuff. And he had me get into my football stance, and he's like, all right, now try to knock this over. And I explode out. It lifts like 2 inches. Then he shows me all these breathing techniques to kind of like charge up my chakras and meridians. I'm like all jacked up. I explode out of my stance. I almost knocked the thing completely over. And then I was like, whoa, this is powerful, because I was a defensive lineman. So that's really what I needed, is just like to be more powerful and explosive. So when I brought this back onto the field, those same energy techniques were really effective for me and very applicable to the task I was actually trying to complete in the field. And that's what helped me become dominant, was just being able to channel energy in a way. And what's cool is now over the years, I've learned that this can be used for any aspect of life, because energy is a source of all things. And so it can be used to heal, it can be used to destroy, it can be used to be creative and to create whatever you want to manifest in the world. It's just about understanding the system and how to channel it correctly.
Mm-hmm. And you can't destroy energy, right? You can only transfer it.
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. And that's really the core of the work I do now, is the alchemy around energy, is finding blockages in people physically, the energetic blockages, right? So we all know what we're talking about. I can say, like, if you have something at work that you're really nervous about, you probably feel some tightness in the upper stomach and that solar plexus. That's just energy that's getting blocked up there, right? So that can be alchemized. We can transmute that energy back up into the heart to bring us into presence again. And that's how energy can be transferred to be used for a benefit instead of working against us.
I was laughing when you were talking about doing this work with your teammates, because I think probably historically, maybe people are more open to this now, but athletes, it's all about strength and stamina, right? And you get that by working out and pushing your body. And there was probably no discussion around energy or things like meditation or chakras or anything like that. So how did people receive that initially? Or were they just like, the proof is in the pudding, they saw you performing better, and so then they were open to trying that for themselves?
Yeah. Well, my coaches hated me for it. Yeah. To give you a frame of reference, my defensive coordinator said, I don't trust anyone on my defense who doesn't chew tobacco. So this is like the level of consciousness that we're coming from. And then the other one, I would also do like visualization techniques, because even at that time, there's a lot of research that literally showed that if you bring in a certain type of meditation and imagery called PET-LEP imagery into a strength-based task, you could improve your performance. You could actually be stronger, like well established. Like it wasn't any woo-woo stuff even, but to them, they never heard of this. But for me, I was like, obviously, we're doing our max lifts. I'm going to do a squat or a bench press. I'm going to go through that imagery beforehand. But they'd watch me do it, and then they'd be like, Epstein's a complete weirdo, and they just like talk trash about me. But I didn't really care, because I was enjoying it and I was dancing the beat of my own drum. And then my teammates, I think they're just looking for utility. They're my friends. Like, I still live in the football house. I was the same guy that they knew, just a dude who was into all this meditation and stuff. And they accepted me for it. It was more so like the authority, the coaches that had more resistance against what I was doing.
When it comes to visualization, I heard you talking about an interesting component to it that I've never heard before, because you hear a lot of people say visualize whatever it is that you want, and also feel that emotion of having that thing. And you said also visualize the struggle part, right? And overcoming that struggle. And I've never heard that before. And I think that's so powerful.
Oh yeah, it's huge. So I'll give you an example where this can be really beneficial, and everyone can relate this to their aspect of life. But I have a UFC fighter fighting this weekend. And I was just talking to him last night, and he has a history of in the past, if it gets really hard, because he's used to his nickname is Ferocious. So he's used to being dominant. But if he comes up against a significant adversity in the past where someone is just as ferocious as him, then he'll kind of like quit a little bit. So that's why I need to do the mental rehearsal with him of actually, hey, you're coming through that experience of like, someone seems like they might be better than you. Someone's got the best of you. Whatever you think your superpower is, they have the same one. And actually living that experience and overcoming the adversity beforehand kind of trains your subconscious to be like, hey, we've been here before. We don't have to sound the alarms. We actually reprogram him to overcome that moment of adversity and push past it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you work with a lot of high performers, elite athletes, other very successful people. What are some of the commonalities that they all share as far as their strengths go? We'll talk about strengths first. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm going to come a little bit out of left field in this one, but I kind of believe that some of these people, like, they have this greater calling that they couldn't help themselves but be these people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's just something in them. They just can't stop. They have this relentless motor, this deeper calling that gets them up early in the morning, that just forces them to keep going, pushing farther, faster, longer. And I think innately, a lot of them, even if they come from backgrounds that aren't that empowering, they just have this in them. And usually in like motivational videos, we kind of hear people talking about this as, oh, you just have such a willpower. You work so hard. You're so disciplined. I don't think that's it. Honestly, I don't think that it's just about that. I don't think Kobe Bryant put up 400 shots every day because he was so disciplined. I think he couldn't help himself. So that's like the commonality, because I just think that people who are performing at such a high level, like there's different levels, right? There's two people, okay, they both get to pro sports. And then maybe the person who is an all-star versus someone who is just kind of average player, maybe they're doing something really different. But to get to that highest level, I think there's just something significant about that person, like a deeper calling, a gift that was built into them, and they end up where they need to be.
Yeah. And I've heard you talk about how if it came down to effort and it came down to willpower and it came down to discipline, whether it's with athletics or for people listening, whatever it is, their workouts, their nutrition, whatever their lifestyle, their career, then we would all probably achieve whatever we wanted to achieve. And yet so many of us feel stuck, stagnant, like for whatever reason, we're not able to achieve that optimal outcome, whatever it is. So it's
an unpopular opinion.
I was just going to say, it's a little bit unpopular, a little different from what we're taught, which is we're taught more effort, more discipline, especially when it comes to wellness things and working out and lifestyle. Everything is very like structured, rigid, just do X, Y, and Z, and then you'll have this outcome. So let's dive into that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I think you just look at the results that most people are creating in their lives. If we look at like the obesity epidemic we have, or the mental health epidemic we have, or the debt that most people live in, or, how many relationships end toxically. If you ask any of these people, they don't want those outcomes. And if you ever even took them into a conscious moment of choice, hey, do you want this? It's going to create these outcomes. They wouldn't do it. It's just that most people are operating from this place of unconsciousness, where they're just in a habit, they're in a routine, they're in their own programming that oftentimes was not put in them by their choice. It was something that they were born into, whether it was a family dynamic or a community or lived experiences. And then they just perpetuate that reality because they're programmed to delete, distort, and generalize any information that would interfere with that. And so we think we're disciplined making all these choices, but oftentimes we're just programmed in a certain way to act out in a certain way. Because I have a lot of friends that are professional athletes now, and I ask them, it's like, how did you build this work ethic? And they'll be like, oh, my dad was, relentless with me every day. He's getting me up at 5 a.m. It's like, it was built into them in many ways, or they had a coach or a mentor, and they build a habit, they build the belief in themselves, and they do it. Some people don't have that though. They don't have those experiences. And so they end up learning disempowering programming, that works against them. I think about, as a side mission, while I was trying to find my way in the mental performance space, I built a pretty large fitness following. And some people would be like, hey, I told you what to do. Like, do the workout, do the nutrition that I gave you. Why don't you do it? And if you get down to their programming at the subconscious level, you realize, oh, this woman believes that if she spends more time working out, she's going to have less time to be there for her kids. And that for her, there's more pain around not being there for her kids than her own health. So until that programming changes, she's going to keep perpetuating the same habits.
Yeah, I want to dive into that as well, because especially when it comes to health and wellness, to your point, people don't want these outcomes, and yet it seems like everybody is struggling. So how do we get down to what our programming is, and how do we change that?
Yeah, I think it starts with awareness. Anyone who works with me for the first time, we go through a baseline assessment where, okay, what is your mental, emotional health like? Not compared to anyone else, just you. If 1 is the worst, it could be 10 is the best. Where are you at from 1 to 10? And then we'll go through physical health, not compared to any Instagram model, just like, what do you want for your health, your stage of life, 1 to 10, career, finances, romantic relationship, work relationships, and the tribe. So close family and friends. And then once you get your scores for everything, then you can go, okay, if this is a 3, let's say physical health, for example, is a 3 out of 10. I want you to feel into the resistance, the separation there between a 3 and a 10. And what are the emotions that come up for you around that? And oftentimes it could be shame, it could be fear, it could be guilt, it could be frustration. And so I have them go feel it in their physical body, coming back to like the energy stuff I learned about when I was playing football. Okay, can you feel that anxiety in your upper stomach? Can you feel that sense of like lack of control in your lower stomach? Let's go in there. I want you to feel the feeling. Stay out of the head. because the head doesn't know. The body knows. Sit deep into it. And I want you to ask yourself, all right, what am I believing to be true that makes me feel so afraid of my physical health? Oh, I believe that I can't be consistent with anything. And sometimes it could be that simple. And someone will be like, oh, well, just tell yourself you can. But it's not the words, it's the energy that lives in the body. And so we have to go through this actual process of healing that, which is accepting it. Okay, my results say I can't be consistent. So actually it's true right now. So I need to go through that little bit of an ego death of like, it is true, I can't be consistent. Acceptance, processing. And then we need to surrender it. So if we want to be reborn, if you will, we have to surrender that story into the past. And there's energy techniques that I work with people on that help with this process. But you can kind of imagine this. I tell people, breathe through it. Imagine that their life is happening on this timeline. Okay, this is a story you've been living in right now. I want you to imagine that you're moving this story into the past on your timeline and you're living in the present now. And then, like you said, energy can't be created nor destroyed. So we just transmute the energy into the opposite, which is, I believe I can be consistent. And again, it's not the words, because someone could hear this and be like, yeah, of course. But it's the energy that's moving the body. So what will happen is they'll feel it shift from their upper stomach solar plex up into their heart and chest and expand. And through that process, they'll be present and they'll be able to actually do what's required to be consistent. And the clarity will flow through there. It'll be like an aha moment, because maybe what they noticed was in the past, to perpetuate the belief of I'm not able to be consistent, they're trying to do workouts they don't like. They hate running, but every day they try to run. And maybe in that moment, when they change the belief to, I believe I can be consistent, you stop deleting, distorting, and generalizing the information that could actually achieve this for you. And the aha moment comes in. You know what? I loved riding my bike when I was a kid. That was really fun. Hey, I can go do that every day, or whatever it might be. Or, hey, I used to play basketball, or I used to like swimming. And then it flows in. It's like, oh, now we're channeling power instead of force. And maybe you go, oh yeah, I can't be consistent. And then maybe you used to try to say, I'm never going to eat anything unhealthy ever. But then now that you believe you can be consistent, you kind of see a path forward. You're like, you know what? I'm mostly going to eat these meals, and maybe a couple times a week, I'm going to deviate. But then you find a way to perpetuate this new belief that you can't be consistent. So that's what's always happening. We're always trying to subconsciously match the belief and make it true. So we'll delete, distort, and generalize any possibility that will conflict with that.
So it's essentially confirmation bias, even when it's to our detriment, right? We're just subconsciously looking for things to confirm whatever belief it is that we have about ourselves.
100%. That's why, like, you could have a friend that's like, you could tell her your routine, and maybe she believes that, like, I can't lose weight after I had my first kid. But she believes that to be true. She says, I can't lose weight after I've had my first kid. And that's just her belief. So you could tell her all your anecdotal stories. You could give her the research. You could say, look, just do this, this, and this. But as long as she believes that she can't lose weight after she's had her first kid, she'll never lose the weight.
Because we kind of make these things our identities too.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it's an ego death to go against that.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to die.
Yeah. There's a lot of parallels to recovery, just as you were talking. I got sober 10 years ago. And in order to get sober, at least in my experience, I had to, one, accept that drugs and alcohol were a problem, that my life was unmanageable, that I had absolutely no control over drinking or using. And the second step to that, essentially, which is kind of still in the first step, but then is that surrender, right? So once I accept it, then I surrender to a new possibility, and then I can begin to change. But I've heard you talk about anxiety before and accepting anxiety. And this is another thing that I feel like people resist, Acceptance feels like you are just allowing whatever negative thing you're experiencing to be happening. But really, when you've talked about it, you said you can't change it until you accept it. So in the example of anxiety, if you're resisting, pushing it away, you can't change out of that state, right? And you can't change that. So let's talk about that a little bit more.
You said my favorite phrase is, what you resist persists. And what you can't accept won't change. And that's just a reality. It's like, when you're just fighting against something, it doesn't matter. It's just going to keep perpetuating. It's like the opposite of what we think we should do. Like, usually we want to no, I need to think about something else. I'm going to think my way away from this resistance I feel inside. The truth of the matter is we just have to accept it for what it is. And you might not even have any rational evidence to back it up. You might be like, well, that's irrational. Why would I accept that's true? Right? If you're someone who has, let's say, for example, you're someone who was cheated on when you're 18, and then when you're 21, and again when you're 24, and by the time you're 25, you're like, all men are cheaters, right? And someone rationally asks you about it, you'd be like, well, obviously I see these other people in relationships and they're not cheaters, but through that emotional trauma created that programming, the belief system that all men are cheaters. And so they would delete, distort, and generalize all their dating options and end up back with cheaters once again, and living in that perpetual state of anxiety because they're feeding that same belief.
I have so many questions, but I'm curious, when you had your fitness company, what were some of the most common belief systems or beliefs that interfered with people reaching their goals? Because I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are experiencing that in their own lives. Yeah,
definitely. I noticed that, and this probably doesn't come as a surprise, but a lot of the big transformations we'd have would come from like younger people. So I think they have less of the history of all those beliefs have been ingrained. But we also did have people who, you know, are in their later 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s who go through transformation as well. But I would just bring that up to say that, like, the longer these patterns are ingrained and the more they're ingrained, like, you know, it can be hard to change them, but it's not impossible by far. I mean, I've actually coached my dad, and he's in his 70s, and he's been able to change some of his beliefs in a really powerful way. So you can do it at any age. But I'd say the biggest thing that I saw that held people back was just like the victim mentality around, like, just, it's not going to work for me. It's not going to work for me. I see all these people consume their content on social media. It must be nice to be them, right? It must be nice to be so thin, so easy for you. You probably eat whatever you want, right? And I think, you know, I went through a weight loss transformation. So did my business partner who I was doing the content with. And so I think that gave a little bit more belief and resonance to people who'd be like, oh, look, like, they've done it, like, I can do it as well. But that's it. I think so many people live with that belief of like, oh, must be nice, like that victim mentality, which infects so many people in so many different ways of like, yeah, must be nice. You know, that cynicism of just like, oh, cool, you did that, right? Well, it's easy for you. And so I think that's the biggest one. And once people were able to step out of that victim state and go, you know what? I believe it is possible for me. That's when things start to shift. And that's where you saw them in the community showing up, being more consistent, putting more days together, checking in, doing their workouts and nutrition, and finding some momentum in that process. But the first step, of course, aside, is like, people need to get out of those victimhood states of being. And those are fueled by the beliefs of, I believe I can't lose weight. I believe I don't have enough money to eat healthy. I believe I don't have time to work out. Those are some of the most common ones. So overcoming those hurdles, turn them into, I believe I have more than enough time to work out. I believe I can afford to eat healthy. I believe that I can be consistent. All those things. It seems really simple, but like I said, as long as you're running the opposite programming, you're deleting the possibility of this actually working for you.
Mm-hmm. I did this a little bit myself this morning. Mm-hmm. I mean, with no formal coaching or anything, but I had been listening to some of your interviews yesterday and consuming your content.
Awesome.
And I mean, I have been so overwhelmed lately with work, and to the point where the past few days I was like, I think I'm going to die. I think I'm going to die. I'm so stressed. I have so much going on. It's not just work, but a lot going on. I've taken on a lot, and I have not had good boundaries, and I'm working on it in therapy and things like that. But yesterday I became aware, after listening to you on other podcasts, that has been my belief system as well, or the narrative that's been running through my head lately is, there are not enough hours in the day. I have taken on too much. This is impossible. Just all negativity. And then I'm like, and then tomorrow I have like back to back to back. And then I have to go and I have to shoot this thing for this brand. And it's all negative and overwhelm and some victimhood, some resentment at me saying, yeah, myself taking on too much. And this morning I did a few things differently. I didn't touch my phone or my computer for 2 hours. I meditated. I did breath work. I stretched. I moved my body a little to the point where like it was still only 7:30 and I was like, I don't know what to do with myself anymore, but this is nice. And I created a different narrative in my head where I was like, this is great. I have 3 episodes I can't wait to do. I've been in this position before where I feel overwhelmed. I've always gotten it done. I do a good job, like just changing, reframing that. And I feel like a different person today. So
that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. So now in this moment, if you were to close your eyes and just check in, do you believe you have more than enough time to do all the things you want to do?
80%.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So that reality will perpetuate itself and you're going to continue to overload your schedule as long as you believe you don't have enough time to do everything you need to do.
That's so counterintuitive.
Yes.
So let's explore that a little bit. So if I don't feel like I have enough time, why do I continually add to that?
Because you have to make it true. Because you're believing that to be true. So you're going to perpetuate it, right? It's just boom, boom, boom. All right. This is my story. This is what I live. All right. So you're going to keep making it true over and over and over again. And it's not even much the words as like the energy in your body and the patterns that represent those words. So like, it's just a feeling. It's almost like the adrenaline of like, yeah, we're going. Rush. We got the next thing. Come on, let's go. And the body gets addicted to it. And then we use the words as a way to move the energy ultimately, if you want to do that. And so the belief is, I don't have enough time to do everything. When you transmute it and you go through the energetic process within your body, it becomes, I believe I have more than enough time to do everything. And when you energetically get to that place, you will start restructuring your schedule in a way to have buffers, to have less obligations, to spread things out over longer periods of time, to design a life where you have more than enough time to do everything.
Okay. Doing that, I'm just thinking in my head, okay, how can I do that? But it also reminds me of when I learned to meditate, I learned TM. And I was just talking about this with my guest that I recorded with previously. And in TM, you meditate twice a day for 20 minutes. And it sounded so daunting for a number of reasons. Sitting there in silence for 20 minutes, daunting. And then it felt like, well, 20 minutes twice a day, once in the morning before work and once in the afternoon. Who has the time? But what I learned is that not only do you create the time for that, but when you take that time, even if it feels like you do not have 1 second to spare, then you create more time and you create more space and more energy to actually be effective in those other areas of your life.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's why time really is an illusion, right? It's just a feeling that there's not enough time. And it's like if you're living in that illusion of lack around time, then it feels like you don't have enough time. And then you could literally live the same day, but because your meditation practice created that spaciousness within yourself, you're just engaging in it in a completely different way.
Yeah. And I've heard you talk about essentially the only things that we can control are our focus and the choices that we make. And I feel like that's relevant to this part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, you know, if I'm focusing on the negative, if I'm focusing on the lack, and then I'm choosing to add onto that, then that's my experience. And that's all of my own doing, really.
Yeah. What you focus on is what you get, always. And we all know someone who like lives in these cycles of their focus. And that focus also leads to the feelings, right? So you know that what you focus on is also contributing to the emotional frequency that you're in. So if you're constantly focused on not enough time, not enough money, whatever it might be, that's going to put you into the emotional frequency of fear. Right? If you're constantly focused on, I have more than enough time, I have more than enough money, it's going to put you into a frequency of peace, acceptance, just a higher emotional frequency. And that's where your power is, right? When you can get into that rest and relaxation, you can be present enough to do what's required in the moment. You don't even have to think. You just do, just go. Yeah. So what you focus on, what you get. When you focus on what you want, you get more of what you want. When you focus on what you don't want, you get more of what we don't want. And we've all lived both sides of that. We know where both paths goes. And sometimes it just takes an awareness of like, oh yeah, I know that. Yes. Everyone watching this, I know that. I know you know that. So what can we do to put this into practice? Something I have a lot of my clients do to just bring more awareness to it is to set alarms every few hours throughout the day. You could do it for a week straight. Just ask yourself, number one, how does it feel to be me right now? Write that down in your note. And then what was I focused on right before that feeling emerged? Write that down. And you're just going to bring so much awareness to how you drive your feelings through your focus, right? I'm focused on how I'm at work and everyone's out to get me. Everyone's out to get me. How do I feel? I feel angry, frustrated, scared, right? Just so that focus is always feeding your feelings. So the first step, of course, with any of this stuff is awareness. So if you can do those alarms for a week, you're going to step into such a more empowered state, because then you can start to choose a new focus with intention.
What are some other things that you do when you work with, whether it's an elite athlete or, a really high achieving person? Because you were saying earlier that they all kind of get to this place. They have this belief maybe that they are the best. I've heard you talk about that on other shows.
Yeah.
And they have this kind of innate thing, this innate drive. Maybe they were raised by somebody who was instilling consistency and habits and rigidity or whatever it was to achieve their goals. So they're already in an elite place when you get into their lives, right? So what are the things that they struggle with, and what are some of the things that you guys do?
Yeah. I would say oftentimes it's not the reason that they bring me in, right? So if someone's really successful in business, they're probably like, I need to hire you. You have to help me make more money, and then we do a baseline. We're just looking at their life and it's like, well, so you're divorced and now your new girlfriend is in a really toxic relationship with you. You said it's a 3 out of 10. You have $10 million in the bank. Do you want to make more money? What's really the source of your suffering, right? And so that's usually it, whether it's an athlete or a business person. It's usually like the things that they don't want to talk about, which is actually creating the suffering. And their way of getting control is focusing on the thing they're already good at. And so part of my job is redirecting them. And I'm not going to tell them what to do, but I'm just going to ask them. I'm going to look at the information and be like, we could try to help you in this area, but do you think it would maybe solve the feeling issue you have right now if we dealt with this other thing instead? And so it's usually that, and sometimes it is, an athlete, like sports specific, but it's mental, emotional more than it is like, I'm not going to tell a baseball player how to swing his bat. Like, I don't know, just swing it, but like I can't notice that he is constantly focusing on how the coach or manager is criticizing him, or the story he has about how he's being criticized, or the media, or whatever it may be. And I might get to go to a place where we can go, so the only reason any of this has any credence is because you believe to be true about yourself. And so it's actually like anything that someone's projecting out of like, this is the issue, to them, and it's making me feel this way. It goes, oh no, you actually believe that to be true by yourself. And so we need to process that and move through that and alchemize that energy to get you to a place where you can just be present and play the game that you love again. So I would say the most common things are definitely like fear of judgment, especially when you have a lot of eyeballs on you. A lot of people are talking about you, which is like, well, it's a double-edged sword, but like a lot of times if you're a pro athlete, it's not the best thing to be on social media. Because so many people are just, can you imagine so many people are just like talking about you?
I get it on such a small scale.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine truly. You just really have to turn a blind eye to it. But I also have a little bit of an issue with that sometimes. Like when I've been on the receiving end of a lot of hate, which has happened only a few times, but there's also now like the gossip threads and people just have nothing better to do with their time. And so for the most part, I know that. And these are not people whose opinions I even value to begin with. But, people say, well, just don't look at it. And it's like, I can't not see some of it. We kind of blame the person who's experiencing it a little bit for experiencing it. But no, I cannot imagine athlete, celebrity, like the scrutiny, the climate that we're in right now where it's encouraged to be mean, the way that people interact online, like, it's awful.
Yeah. So you want to know the secret for them and for you too, whenever you see this? Because I had to deal with this as well. Because like we built a YouTube channel, over 100 million views on there. There's like a lot of people. So of course there's always going to be mean people saying things. Whenever you see it, okay, fine. I am. I am. It's all God. Okay. That's your perception. I am. I am. Whatever it is. Even if you're rationally going, that's the opposite of what I am. Okay, fine. I am. And there's something so liberating and just seeing it all as source, all as God, and just being like, that's a perception. Fine. It's true. I am whatever you say I am. Famous words by Eminem.
Yeah.
I am whatever you say I am. If I wasn't, then why would you say I am?
Yeah.
And there's just so much of liberation, because usually what we resist persists, right?
Yeah.
We want to go, that's not a true story. How could you say it about me?
And then
like,
you get
it's
defensive.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been there. And then the only way out is through. It's just going, fine, I am. Because why are their words hurtful? Maybe you're believing it to be true, or maybe that's like your worst fear. And maybe there's like 1% of you that's like, could that be true? And so you just go through this process of I am. So an athlete, it's like, oh, how can we pay you so much money? You're such a bust. Okay, I am a bust. I am. Yeah, I am a waste of your team's money, right? Whatever it is, and whatever you're seeing, like, people talking about you, gossiping about you. Oh, who does she think she is? She's this. She can't say that. Okay, fine, I am. And how empowering is it to be able to look someone even in the eye and just go, I am. That's what you believe. Okay, fine, I am. I am whatever you say I am. Because then what do they say? Ultimately, they're just like,
yeah, disarming. It's disarming them completely.
It's like Eminem on stage, right? In that, like, at the end of 8 Mile, he's calling out all of his own insecurities. Like, yeah, I do live with my mom in a trailer park, and this guy did have sex with my girlfriend, and my friend did shoot himself. Boom, boom, I am. It's just liberation. And it's just all about you and your process. And then the person goes, all right, well, I guess I'm going to move on from you now. Right? I'm going to move on because the energy is dispersed. So there's nothing there anymore. But if you fight it, then it's going to continue. It's like, oh, there's juice here. Let's keep putting more kindling in the fire. But if you go, okay, just pour water in the fire. Oh, I am. And? Okay. All right, we're done. We don't want to mess with this person anymore. They're not fun.
It's so interesting because I think we look at, especially athletes, and think of them as invincible, not only physically, but mentally as well. And it's a little reassuring, I guess, to hear that they struggle with these things too. I was very into the Olympics this year. Simone Biles, like, never watched gymnastics before, not since I was younger. And I watched her Netflix special. I think it was only a couple episodes, but she was very open about struggling. And I mean, she received so much backlash when she backed out of the Tokyo Olympics because she had the spin. She could die. I mean, it's crazy.
She's so selfish.
Yeah, right? I mean, people still, and I saw comments on videos from these Olympics where people are just talking shit, and that's just, again, the climate. But it really kind of like humanized this sport, I think. I don't know if that's the right word, but and in general, because people are being more vocal about this. And you watch her and you think, she's got all the confidence, she's superhuman. And I remember she was saying this vault that she just did in these Olympics, I've done it 100 times. Every time I'm terrified. I'm afraid I'm going to die. And you're like, oh, I don't get that story when I'm watching this on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. And I work with a lot of fighters, and similarly, like, they have to go into that. It's like, I could die as I'm going into this. So there's a lot of edge. There's a lot of insecurities that come in that. And it's spiritual, I think that sports are very spiritual. That's why I enjoy them. For me, it's not about like, did they get a hit or it's about like, what is the spiritual journey you had to go on and through to get to the other side of this thing that you're facing right now. And I think we all have that, whether you're an athlete or a business owner or a mom, like whatever it is, like everything that's in front of you right now, it's there for a reason. And I think that a lot of our, the things that we see as curses, it's like, and I see this in sports a lot too, it's like, oh, why did I get injured? It's like, well, the universe wanted to redirect you into an area of your life that you weren't giving attention to. And now you're forced to sit and just deal with it. I think that happens. We get redirected often to deal with the deeper spiritual work that's there.
Absolutely. I could not agree with that more. And I always think back to my own experience, and almost every single time I thought that the worst thing ever that could ever possibly happen to me was happening, it turned out to be a really good thing. A redirection at, the very least, something that turned out to be incredibly positive at the best. And I always use the example of getting sober. I mean, I thought that getting sober at 28 was the end of my life as I knew it, the worst possible fate that I could ever
What a boring
meet.
life you had to live.
Yeah, exactly. My boring life of sobriety. And meanwhile, I was living alone in an empty apartment, snorting dust off the floor and having seizures, but I didn't want to get sober, God forbid. And that's just one example. My divorce was another. Certain no's that I've had career-wise turned out to be the best things for me, and I think that we can all look back and accumulate that evidence in our own lives.
Yeah. Rumi says, the wound is where the light gets in. I love that quote, because when you forget, when you're in it, right? And you're like, why? What's happening? And trying to rationalize and explain it. It's like, maybe there is no rational explanation for you right now. Maybe you can look back a few years from now and you'll be able to paint a story about it, but like, this is just what needs to happen. And so be present for it, be in it, process it, don't suppress, let it all come through, all the emotions, all the feels, let it come through, and really pay attention to the inspiration of where you're being called now, because it's obviously a catalyst in another direction.
How does this differ from therapy? Because I think people are probably listening like, oh, okay, well, like I see a therapist. What's the difference?
Yeah. So I would say therapy is primarily a tool for awareness.
Mm-hmm.
The work I'm talking about is not just bringing things to awareness, but actually going into your physical body, pulling out this scar tissue, this programming that's emerged from trauma in your life or lived experience, removing it in real time, taking that same energy and transmuting it to be used for whatever you desire in your life moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes, I've worked with people with PTSD, addiction, you name it. Like, they've gone to therapy for years. They come to me in 1 hour, we solve the issue. So it's just a very efficient form of transmutation, because we're going right to the source. Now, to do that, it requires a very high level of vulnerability and willingness. And that in itself takes a special kind of person who's ready. They have to be ready for it. And you're ready because you hear the call.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that's a primary difference.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, tell everybody where they can follow you and get your book,
Yes.
Program to Fail.
Thank you. Yeah, I think people will enjoy the book because I tell the story of how I even learned a lot of these tools, and then like what I had to do for myself, my own traumas. Like, I had to go through a lot of like my own healing process from like sexual trauma at a young age, and healing through that, and then having success in different business ventures, and then bringing it to pro athletes. So the first part of the book talks about that. The second part is a playbook, because I want everyone to have access to the same thing I give to my coaching clients. So that's available on Amazon, Program to Fail. And then I have a website, thebrandonepstein.com, on my Instagram, all the things.
All the things. Thank you so much.
Thank you.